Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to This Week at Work, the only show to pack workplace news, practical HR solutions, and timely insights into every 30-minute episode. From the latest rulings in the courtroom to the strategies unfolding in the boardroom, and from real conversations taking place on the front lines to spotlighting what similar companies are doing about the challenges they face. This Week at Work brings you the conversations that matter most to HR professionals and business leaders like you. Brought to you by AIM Employers Association and Ogletree Deacons, live every Thursday morning. This is your opportunity to connect with their experts and ask your burning questions. So what's keeping you up at night? Let's face it together now on This Week at Work.
Hi, good morning, Bert. How are you today?
I'm doing well. A little chilly out there today, Phil, but at least the sun's shining.
This is the turning point. Today's the day it turns around. This is the last day of this kind of winter for us. I'm convinced of it. After this, by Sunday, it's going to be 50.
Winter's
and
last
after
hurrah.
that, we're done with our 0-degree days after that.
I hope you're right. I did see it's supposed to be, I think, 60 next Wednesday. Just, you got to love St. Louis right in the middle here.
Right. Our business in Florida, I was talking with Dominique down there yesterday in our morning call. We have a morning huddle every morning, and she's on the call. And, right now the topic starts with weather that called us because it's so cold here. And, she was complaining that it was down to like 65 as a low point. And I'm like, okay, now that's just rubbing it in.
You should have broken out the violin music for that.
Oh, yeah. And she was complaining about it as well. I'm like, she's like, oh, it's so cold.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. Anyhow, it's all perspective, isn't it? I think if we were up north in a Canadian-U.S. hockey match, I don't know if you can see my screen behind me. It might even be a little cooler up there. But are you a big hockey fan, Bert, for U.S. versus Canada?
I am. I'm a big hockey fan, period. And I think this tournament has really been quite interesting. A lot of fun. I guess the championship is going to be tonight in Boston. U.S. and Canada facing each other again. And my guess is that the American national anthem is going to receive a lot of applause and singing along. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when the Canadian national anthem is played.
Yeah, I don't know what the over and under is on that, but I think it's going to it will be interesting. What I would like to see, I think what would be awesome would be a cheer through the entire Canadian instead of a boo or just silence out of respect, but more of a cheer. Like, all right, look, we can get along. Our politics can do what they want, but just as sports fans, we get along. But I know that the two countries in the history of hockey, it's not unusual for it to be very contested. Put politics aside, but having the politics mixed into it makes it a lot more exciting.
Well,
that's for sure.
I have to say the last game, for those who don't follow hockey, the last game, which was up in Canada when the U.S. beat Canada 3-1, about 10 seconds after the puck was dropped, our two hometown boys, Keith the Tkachuk brothers,
Matthew and Brady Tkachuk.
Matthew and Brady. I almost said Keith, the dad. And so Matthew and Brady dropped their gloves and initiated some fights with some of the Canadian players. So it was good. There's a lot of blood boiling over. Both the Tkachuks have been very outspoken about how proud they are to be American and don't really appreciate or tolerate the disrespecting of America.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be fun. Can't wait to watch that. I hope I can stay awake.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, another thing, the program that we did, a week or so ago, and we aired it again last week in our time slot here. That was a great program, and having Fred and Luther, just having some fresh faces, Bert, on the program was nice. And the insight, that Luther was able to bring was fantastic. And what I want to do is I just want to show you, right, what Monique came up with AI following that program. We do have a segment we don't always host called Filbert's Forum, where we're really putting the two of us together. But Nick, I don't know if you can produce what Monique sent over for us to take a look at on the show here
right now.
All right. There.
Whoa. Whoa.
There we go. Look at that.
Are you saying this isn't a fresh face? This reminds me when Monique prepared this. I guess this is what a real life Filbert would look like if you and I had a kid together. The kid would grow up looking like this. That's a frightening thought.
Well, let's hope that it will get the best features from both of us. But it's pretty good. I got to say, I don't know if our listeners can chat in whether they think it looks more like you or more like me. I'm going to say I think it looks more like you with my haircut. But I think it favors your bloodline there, Bert. But a great picture there by Monique, a little bit of AI fancy work. And I know our listeners know we like talking about AI and those types of things, but I'd like to get some of their comments and see if it's if this is a Bert leaning Filbert or a Phil leaning Filbert.
but a Filbert nonetheless.
Yeah, a Filbert nonetheless. All right. So hockey tonight. We got the leadership conference coming up, and there's only 75 seats left. All right. So it's going to be by the end of the month, it will be done. There won't be any seats left. There seem to be about 20 seats going per day at this point. Bert, giving you a quick update on that. But it's going to be a fantastic conference. So if you have been waiting to get your seats, I'm going to encourage you to do that now. Again, every year we have someone will call and go, hey, our team really wants to go. Can you get me 5 seats? Can you get me 10 seats? And you can't do that, right? I can't bump people out. We put people on a waiting list, and once in a while, the waiting list will open up a few seats, but very seldom does it open up any significant seating. So if that is something that you're interested in attending, I would suggest locking that in right now. Once the program is over, then go lock it in. Because we do have some important things to talk about with Lawyer on the Clock. Right, Bert?
We do.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready, Phil.
All right, Nick, pull that lever.
Curious about a case that could wreck your workplace? Lucky for you, we have a lawyer on the clock.
So, Phil, we've been talking a lot about the new Missouri paid sick leave law. Just to remind all of our listeners that this new law, which was passed during the last election, so it was a ballot initiative, the law goes into effect, or the paid sick leave is available for accrual and use starting May 1 of this year. The first significant date is actually April 15. That's the date that employers have to post notices informing employees about their rights under the Missouri paid sick leave law. As we mentioned before on the program, and as I mentioned during our separate program that we did just on this law, simulcast program we did at your offices at AIM, there has been a challenge filed directly at the Missouri Supreme Court challenging this new law.
And we had the attorney on the program. I think on one of the days you were out traveling, and talked a little bit about that challenge. So that's something, if you're interested, someone can go back and look at that program to understand this challenge and reasoning.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So oral argument on that is scheduled for March 12th next month, so coming up in a couple of weeks. Last week, the petitioner, the lawyer representing the people who are challenging the law, your guest you had on, they filed their brief at the Missouri Supreme Court. And the other side, I think, is due to respond to that. I think it's next week, and then again the oral argument will be on March 12th. And so basically, in their brief, they're saying that the law should, or the Missouri Supreme Court should set aside the law because Proposition A's fiscal note summary was insufficient and unfair, in that it failed to identify the costs to local government and private entities, as the fiscal note summary does not state the costs submitted by Clay County, Missouri, and the private impact stated by the Missouri Budget Project. So that's the first avenue of challenge. The second avenue of challenge is that the Supreme Court should set aside Proposition A because of the summary statement for Proposition A, and that's what was provided on the ballot, was insufficient and unfair, and that it failed to give voters notice of what Proposition A would accomplish, as it lists existing provisions of law which are not amended and failed to state key provisions of Proposition A such that it constitutes an election irregularity. And what they're really getting at on this one is that people thought that they were voting on just minimum wage, and they didn't realize that they were voting on a Missouri paid sick leave law. And then finally,
and that's what I've heard most people in conversation express to me. Most Missourians that have shared their expression saying, well, I did or I didn't vote on that because of their position on minimum wage. Very few people, I think, were voting with paid sick leave in mind.
Yeah. Well, and then the third point is that they're arguing is that Proposition A violates what's called the single subject requirement of Article 3, Section 50 of the Missouri Constitution, because it has two separate and distinct subjects, and that the increase in the minimum wage and the newly created sick leave law are not a single subject, but instead two separate subjects. And so I think that one's really got some teeth to it. And then their final point that they rely upon is that Proposition A is invalid because it also violates the Missouri Constitution because it fails to give notice of the single subject of Proposition A by listing a number of unrelated matters contained therein. So it's kind of the converse of the immediately preceding argument. So I think those constitutional challenges have some real teeth to them, and we'll have to see what ends up happening here.
So I heard you in the pre-show, you were talking about how you will be watching this. So, I mean, I'm not want to call you a little nerdy or geeky, Bert, or something like that. Wouldn't really be a professional of me, but people who have a deep interest in this space.
Phil, if that's the worst thing I get called today, I'll be fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but this is something that is going to be broadcast.
It is. Yeah. The Missouri Supreme Court oral arguments are broadcast live. If you go to the Missouri Supreme Court website, you could listen to oral arguments live, or you can listen to recorded oral arguments. If anybody wanted to go back and listen to my oral argument where I prevailed 6-0 in front of the Missouri Supreme Court about a year ago,
you're welcome
to do that.
Not everybody can claim that. That's right.
That's right. So yeah, it will be broadcast, and I will be listening diligently because, in particular, I'll be listening to the judge's questions of the attorneys, because I think through that we might be able to glean a little insight as to which way they're leaning on this law.
All right. Well, let me just wrap this up with a few points, because you and I did a simulcast program for those employers that were going to be impacted by this back in November. And we did it in two parts because we knew first we needed to come out early with some information as we were moving into the close of the year, and businesses were trying to establish budgets, and some things that are affected by this law, like our IT systems, may need to be adjusted, and those things just don't happen overnight. So we had an early session in December, and we had a great turnout simulcast, both in person and online. And we announced it as two parts. We would have a part in December, and later in the first quarter of 2025 that we would have part two. And if you attended part one, you would get part two complimentary. So since then, we've had more people interested in attending and learning more as the date for implementation draws near. And so here's how that works for anyone that's interested in attending. If you are still interested and you did not attend part one, you can purchase the program, and you can go back and watch the recording of part one. And then you would be also given the access code to participate live, whether online or in person, for part two. And Bert, I can tell you that there's been a lot more people sign up now that we're getting closer, and you get to that oh heck phase of this is going to really happen. And so what people are saying is, well, do I really need to be worried until this lawsuit or this, I don't know, what do you call it when this challenge is just determined?
Yeah.
And I think that answer is yes, right? Because our part two program will be on March 20th, and we pushed that as far after the oral arguments as we could so we can get a feeling for that. But hopefully with enough time to make the necessary adjustments, assuming this passes. And what you and I were talking about is it won't be a decision of, yes, it works, but you have to change the rules to how it works. It either is upheld or denied, and it will probably go through as it was defined. So the things that we're talking about, if it does go through, would still all apply.
Yeah, so the Supreme Court will decide whether the law is valid or invalid.
Those are the words I was looking for.
Yeah, if it's valid, the law as it was passed back in November will go into effect. Again, April 15, notices need to be posted, and May 1, people can start accruing and using their leave. And so, yeah, that it goes into effect as is if the Supreme Court upholds it. If the Supreme Court rejects it, decides it's invalid, then it gets thrown out. Now, there is one other development, and this one won't take long to share. Missouri House Bill number 567, which I think was proposed late last week and is making its way through the Missouri General Assembly. They proposed modifying the law such that it takes effect. Employees would begin to accrue leave January 1, 2026, with the notice posting of December 15, 2025. So basically extending the implementation of the law by another 7 months. As far as I can tell, I don't think there were any other proposed changes in this House bill.
Okay.
But it's just interesting that they have put those dates past the next election, and also to give employers more time to be able to comply, and also probably for additional challenges to work their way through. So
yeah,
I'm not quite sure of the timing on the passage of this, but there is another avenue of attack taking place simultaneously.
So I don't know if that will happen because that's awful logical. So I'm not sure if we're gonna see that type of logic play out, but I hope we do,
Yes.
because it's complicated to start these types of accrual programs that already align with your other paid leave programs in the middle of the year in any cycle, right? It's much easier from a management standpoint, not just technology. That's probably easier to do mid system, but from a PTO, vacation, sick days, from those types of leave programs, you kind of start them and then you got to reset them in May, and that's kind of complicated. So for no other reason than giving our employers a chance to get on this and do it right from the beginning, I hope that part of it happens.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, Bert, what else we have?
Well, I know we're taking a lot of time on Lawyer on the Clock this morning.
You go ahead. These are important topics.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention yesterday that the Senate confirmation hearing was held on President Trump's nominee for the U.S. Department of Labor Secretary, Lori Chavez DeRemer. It's interesting because we talked about it on the program. When she was a senator, and I was a senator. I think she was a senator, not a House rep. No, she was a rep. I apologize. She was a rep. And she, as a rep, actually supported the PRO Act, which we've also talked about quite a bit on the program. That, in my opinion, it's sort of the PRO Act kind of represents a sea change in how labor organizing would be done in the United States, and what the Department of or the National Labor Relations Board, the types of unfair labor practices that they would be bringing against employers and or pursuing against employers, and the damages and remedies available. It would be just a sea change in labor law, and kind of represents, in my opinion, every bad idea the unions have had over the last 50 years, all wrapped up into one bill. She actually, as a Republican, voted for that when she was the Oregon state rep, or the federal rep from Oregon, House of Representatives member. And it was quite surprising that Trump nominated her. Now, again, she's been nominated for the U.S. Department of Labor secretary, not the NLRB, so a little less influence there on union related issues over at the Department of Labor versus the NLRB. But she did quite a bit back off of her prior support of that bill. And she did it in an interesting way by saying, I'm no longer a House of Representatives member from Oregon. I am now being nominated for a Department of Labor secretary position. And in that position, my job would be to carry out the agenda of the person who nominated me and who the people elected. And that would be President Trump's agenda, which is definitely decidedly more pro-business than certainly the PRO Act would be. So it was interesting. She definitely distanced herself from those prior comments, and it'll be interesting to see what ends up taking place with her nomination. My hunch is she will make it through, just like every one of Trump's other nominees so far.
Yeah, I think it will be, but maybe a little bit more controversy in that space from within the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the end, you have to decide, right? Is that going to be what causes you to say yes or no to a vote?
That's right.
All right, Bert, anything else that's important for this week?
Yeah, I just want to throw one more in, Phil, on the not such a good idea category. An NLRB judge issued a decision yesterday, actually on Tuesday. Judge Robert A. Giannassi, I've actually appeared in front of him before. And in this decision, Judge Giannassi ordered a company called Valladares Landscaping Artists to rehire Christian Martinez and Efren Velasquez and cease and desist from, among other things, threatening to get workers deported if they continue to raise issues about their paychecks. Now, what's interesting about this case is that the two employees complained to Mr. Valladares about their pay and said they weren't being paid properly. And in response to that, Mr. Valladares said that if they don't want to work, they don't have to show up for work. If they want to complain, then he's going to get them deported. And then, interestingly, there was apparently some sort of incident.
You're going to get them deported. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Get them deported. And then, interestingly, there was a off-site encounter between the two employees and Mr. Valladares' wife when she was on her way to church. Now, the record that I read didn't say that anything significant happened that day. But when the two employees showed back up at work again the next time, Mr. Valladares told them to get off the property and pulled a gun on them. And so, again, just kind of
So the owner pulled the gun on the employees, yeah?
Yes, not in when your employees come to complain to you about labor and employment related issues, that is protected concerted activity. They have a right to complain about their pay, to discuss their pay. They were doing it in concert with one another. That's also protected under the Fair Labor Standards Act, that they have a right to contest and complain about those things. And in response to your employees complaining about those things, pulling a gun is probably not the best idea.
Not a good idea at all.
Yeah.
That's not a good look for an owner.
Definitely not. Definitely
Yeah,
not.
and I'm sure there's a lot to this story,
Yes.
but not a good look. And what I'm curious about, and I think maybe you mentioned as we were chatting about some of this, is that he represented himself.
He did. He represented
That's
him.
not ever a good idea either, right? There's a lot of confidence, it sounds like, in this guy.
Yes, he represented himself during these proceedings, and the judge found that his testimony was, quote, confusing, self-contradictory, and rambling. And now he's forced to take these two employees back who he had pulled the gun on. So not quite sure how this one's going to work out. I don't think it's going to be good for anyone.
Okay. So that one sounds interesting.
Yes.
I got lots of jokes here, but I'm not going to use those jokes because somebody would complain online that I wasn't being appropriate.
Of course.
Yeah. So we'll just say don't pull guns. Okay.
That's enough for today, Phil. Yes.
That's enough for today.
Covered it.
Well, that's a good one. That's not a good idea. I like how you phrase that. Our friend Michelle has submitted a question. We got a couple questions here from some fantastic AIM members. What Michelle didn't do, and we're getting to our burning questions. Thank you, Nick. What Michelle didn't do is comment. So Michelle, I need you to comment on our photograph. Is that Bert leaning picture, or is that a Phil leaning picture in our Philbert picture? All right. So here's her question. If the company already provides over 56 hours a year in paid time off that can be used for any reason, can you confirm that Prop B does not apply to that company? So let me take a crack at it, Bert, and then you fill in some gaps. And I'm going to say first, I've learned well from Bert, it depends. And it's going to depend on a few things like how do you accrue that 56 hours, and how is it loaded or front loaded, and how is it available? And how do you track the time that people are taking off and for what reason? So if we say for any reason and people take that time for vacation but not sick days, there's I guess some debate and question of whether or not they're still entitled to sick days. And you have to decide then, Michelle, do you want to be the organization that becomes the case law? So, Bert, I'm going to let you fill in some other more details around that, and we'll start with it depends.
Yeah, Phil, you did a pretty good job on that. It sounds like you were paying attention when we put on our program. So that's right. It does depend. Basically, I think that the bottom line is, Michelle, is that your existing policy needs to provide for the same benefit and for the same ability to use the sick leave under the same conditions as the sick leave law. And so it's sort of in those finer details. It's not enough to just say we provide 56 hours that can be used for any purpose, therefore we don't need to comply. You actually need to look at how it's accrued, like Phil said, whether it's front loaded, whether it can truly be used for any purpose, and then under the same circumstances. So that leads to documentation requirements, whether you all are requiring documentation, not requiring documentation. You would definitely
notice
need
period.
You would definitely need to, notice period, exactly. So that's a huge one. So my hunch is that your paid sick leave or your paid leave policy probably does not match the paid sick leave law and would require some modification rather than a wholesale rewriting if you already provide this amount of paid time off. But it's not just enough to say we provide the time for any reason, therefore we don't need to comply. It does indeed depend.
Yeah, and the other thing that gets tricky in this is how it's accrued and carried over, because you have to think about the law is one aspect of a methodology of accruing and carrying over and really having a bank, and then how that bank can be used. And you can change your policy at any time, but you can't change the law and how you're doing those things. So that's going to definitely be an additional measurement mechanism that ideally would probably never come into effect, but nevertheless, you would still need to be accruing and measuring those those hours available and or accrued.
Yep. Very well said.
Okay, we had another one here, and from our friends over at I'll just say from Jennifer here. We'd like to try and be confidential with the company, but it's regarding postings. When 90% of their employees are remote, do we still email the posting as well as post it in the office? And I assume she's referring to any of the general federal and state required postings. And that answer, Jennifer, is absolutely. That's the best thing to do. And those posters can be made available in email format for you. I know you do a lot of work with AIM, and if that's some help, all you have to do is call the Solution Center, and we can help you with that very easily. Yeah. Yep. All right, Bert, are you ready for some burning questions?
I think we have time for one, but yeah, let's at least get to the one.
This is an easy one. Is sexual orientation and gender identity still protected?
So that's a good question. The Supreme Court of the United States said that sexual orientation and gender identity is protected. So that is the law of the land. Now, whether sexual orientation and gender identity as part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion type program has some sort of preference. I think certainly if you're a federal contractor, the answer to that is no after President Trump's executive orders, although there are a lot of court challenges to that. And if you're a private employer, the answer is it really depends on your on your policy. But there are even challenges against private companies who are still pursuing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that have some sort of a favoritism or bias in favor of certain protected categories to the exclusion of other protected categories. So sexual orientation, gender identity, yes, it is protected in the workplace, but what that means is that people have to be treated equally regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. It does not mean that those people would get any sort of preference.
So if I summarize it really easy, just hire based on the merit of the individual and don't give anyone preference at all based on any factor, feature, quality, trait, any of these other things other than merit, and you'll be just fine.
That's a good way to say it, Phil.
So easy. It's so easy.
It's so easy, and that's the safe approach.
All right. Okay. All right, Bert, that gets us right up to 8 o'clock. We have tons of burning questions, but you keep submitting them and we'll keep answering them. Let's go for USA Tonight, since we're both Americans and proud of that. And I'll be curious on the over and under whether they boo or cheer the national anthem for Canada. I'm going to go with they're going to cheer it. But that's just my positive attitude, Bert. You know, I'm just positive smiles all the time.
Hey, Phil, it's in Boston. They're going to boo it.
Well, that is a factor. That's right. It's not like it's, a Midwest or Southern welcoming. It's Boston. So you're probably right. They will be, but I'm changing my position. All right. We'll be back here next Thursday at 7:30. Until then, go out and be good to someone, even if they're Canadian. Bye-bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please like it, share it, and make sure it's on your calendar. If you're an on-demand viewer, don't forget you can be part of the show by watching live at 7:30 a.m. Central every Thursday morning, when you can get your burning questions answered by using the question mark icon to the right of the player. In fact, you can ask a question now. Head over to aimea.org. Under Member Resources, you'll find This Week at Work. Click Listen Live to register for our next episode and submit a question. Or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. We'll see you next week when we discuss what's happening this week at work.